Hi everyone, my name is Sandy Mackey and I'm the Housing Research and Policy Lead at Macola Development Services. Thanks for joining us today to talk about the Strathcona Regional District Housing Needs Report and the preliminary findings for Electoral Area A. I'd first like to acknowledge with respect the many nations and traditional territories within which this study is taking place, including the Hattahset First Nation, Homolko First Nation, Cayuquit Checkliseth First Nation, Klahoose First Nation, Comox First Nation, Mawachat Muchalat First Nation, Nuchalat Tribes, the Clawetsis First Nation, Weewaike First Nation, and Wewaikum First Nation. Throughout this presentation, I'll go through a quick project overview. We'll talk about some of our preliminary findings, outline our next steps, and let you know how you can continue to contribute to this project. Briefly, my company, Macola Development Services, is a professional nonprofit consulting firm with about 20 staff working across Vancouver Island. We've got over 30 years of experience in both the market and non-market housing sector, and we've been conducting rural housing needs assessments across the province over the past 3 years. So the goals of this project are pretty simple. First and foremost, we're planning to meet all provincial requirements. New legislation passed out of the province in 2019 requires that all local governments, including electoral areas, conduct a housing needs report every 5 years. In accordance with that legislation, we'll be developing a regional housing needs report for each of the electoral areas within the SRD. It will include a series of quantitative data indicators as well as significant community engagement. At the end of the project, we'll be providing some high-level recommendations, and we'll be sharing the results with the board and the public. To note, though, is that this project is not for any of the municipalities or treaty nations within the SRD. It is just for the electoral areas. What you can expect to see in this report is local and regional information on demographics, households, incomes, economy, housing affordability. And you can also see a little bit about who it's happening to, things like engagement data, some of our affordability analysis, which lets us know which income and population groups are struggling the most to meet their housing needs. What's not in this report is the next step, where new housing should go or the form or density it should take. The SRD and the electoral areas will decide how to act on information in the report to best support their communities, often through OCP or zoning bylaw updates, partnership development, and community education. So jumping right into it, the study area for this project is the rural Strathcona Regional District, and specifically for this presentation, we're focusing on electoral area A. Looking at some of the early data that we've got, first population households, the population of electoral area A is actually increasing from a little under 800 people in 2016 to probably close to 1,100 in 2031 by our projections. With that is an according increase in the number of households. Something to note, however, is that you're consistently requiring more households for less people as fewer and fewer people live in each housing unit. In 2016, there was a little over 2 people per household, and we're expecting that number to drop to about 1.9 people per household. And that often happens as the population ages and family dynamics change. Typically, we see that more houses are required for less people. And a big reason for that is the changing demographics in electoral area A. The thing I'll draw your attention to is the green parts of these graphs. In 2016, those green parts, which represent folks over the age of 64, so 65 plus, that made up about 25% of your total population. And by 2026, we expect that to be closer to 37%. So an increasing percentage of the population over the age of 65 in those senior or elder age cohorts. And that's important because seniors and elders require different types of housing to meet their needs, things like accessible units, ground floor units, and often supportive and healthcare services integrated within housing. Moving on to the cost of renting across the regional district, unfortunately, we don't have specific data for each electoral area, so we have to use Campbell River to give us our best guess at what the trends are across the region. And in Campbell River, we've seen a fairly significant increase in the cost of renting. Since 2011, after adjusting for inflation, the average or the median rental rate has gone up by about 72%. The most significant increase has actually come in 3+ bedroom units. So in houses and rental units that are most appropriate for families. Those units are up almost they've well over doubled, up 111% over the course of 10 years. This data doesn't tell us anything about the type or condition of unit. So often some of the cheaper units on the market tend to be of lower condition. It also doesn't tell us if it's a full house or an apartment building. It just tells us that it has a certain number of bedrooms. So even though this data is not perfect, it is definitely instructive as to what some of the trends we're seeing across the region are and some of the challenges that renters are facing in the SRD. Where we do have specific information is actually in the cost of ownership. Most of the homes across Electoral Area A are single detached with some manufactured homes or mobile homes in the mix there. And the single detached housing has actually maintained a relatively stable price point over the past 10 years. The average single detached unit in 2020 was about $400,000. And one thing that happens in electoral areas with smaller populations is that it can be challenging to draw certain price point comparisons for a single year because the relative volume of sales is so low, prices can fluctuate widely. So what we tend to look at more is the trend. And in electoral area A, we're seeing a general trend of stability with some increases in the past few years. But there was obviously an outlier in 2011 where the price points were quite a bit higher. Again, this data, similar to the rental data, only tells us what the price point is and what type of home it is. It doesn't tell us about the property or land assets associated with the sale. So some of these could be, rural properties on large acreages, or they could be much smaller properties that are typical country residential. What's maybe more instructive is the relationship between the cost of the median home and the amount the median household income could afford in mortgage. So what we've done on this graph is just make some basic mortgage assumptions about the amount of money that the median household income could afford to spend on housing and map that against the cost of the median home. So in green, you've got the the purchasing power of the median income, and in the sort of orangish color, you've got the cost of the median home. And throughout most of the study time between sort of 2012 and about 2015, the numbers have been fairly well matched. Only a couple of years where they've disagreed. But over the past 3 years, sort of 2018 to 2020, we've seen costs of housing rise and the purchasing power of the median income stay about the same. Now we've got one of the largest gaps between those two numbers that we've seen in recent years. And that's something to watch. Electoral Area A is still more affordable than many other parts of the regional district, but that affordability is potentially becoming more challenging for a larger group of people. So this is something that we can continue to monitor and watch moving forward. And it's an important thing to monitor when looking at tracking housing needs in your regional district. And that rising cost of rent and cost of ownership is impacting something called core housing need. It's our best catch-all statistic. It combines 3 key housing indicators: affordability, suitability, and adequacy. So it basically is your home affordable to your households? Does it have enough bedrooms for the number of people and composition of individuals in your family or your household group? And is it in good condition? If you're in any one of those 3 things, unaffordable, not enough bedrooms, or in poor condition, you're considered in core housing need. And what we've tracked is that, in electoral area A and across the Strathcona Regional District, renters tend to have significantly higher rates of core housing need. In electoral area A, nearly 2/3 of all renters were in core housing need, and across the SRD in total, about 40% of all renters in core housing need. Electoral Area A actually matches up pretty well with the rest of the regional district in terms of the total number of people in core housing need as well as the number of owners in core housing need. But in general, you've got some fairly high rates of renter core housing need, which is really concerning. However, there are not very many renters in electoral area A, so though it is a fairly high percentage, that could represent only a small number of real individuals and real households in that challenging situation. What's maybe more instructive is looking at who is struggling and which types of family groups are in core housing need. On the left, you can see couples with and without children mapped and their rates of core housing need for those 3 indicators. And on the right, lone parents and singles or roommates. Lone parents overwhelmingly have much higher rates of core housing need, especially affordability at 42%. That's because lone parents tend to have only one income and the added cost burden of finding housing that's appropriate for both them and their children. Single people and roommates, those tend to be the oldest and youngest people in our communities. Often they're people just starting out of their careers, or they're folks who are single seniors living alone. And again, affordability is another challenge, 35% in an unaffordable situation. And it's not just data and quantitative metrics. We've actually conducted a fairly substantial community engagement process. As of this recording, we've received well over 400 responses to a community survey that's been going around the region. 8% of those responses came from electoral area A. And when we pool everything together, we just pulled some basic statistics out. About 26% of all survey respondents indicated that their current housing did not meet their needs. And in the next 5 years, almost 60% were worried about the cost of utilities, 50% worried about the cost to repair and maintain their home, and almost 40% worried about their physical ability to maintain and keep their home up. And I think that aligns well with what we're seeing in terms of an aging demographic. Folks being worried about being able to keep their home up and keep shoveling snow and mowing the lawn and chopping wood and things like that. And I've also just pulled a couple of key quotes here. This first one, my eldest son and I had to purchase our house together because neither of us could afford to rent or purchase on our own, and my younger two sons will likely be at home for some time because they cannot afford to live on their own. This is a really common type of quotation that we heard across the different community engagement events. Lots of folks saying that they, maybe are in a current affordable place for them, but they're really worried about their children and their children's ability to continue to live in these communities. We also heard a lot of people talking about Airbnb and Vrbo, that those properties are taking away rental options. And as well, folks are talking about how many of the homes across electoral area A are not well maintained and are becoming unhealthy for those who live in them, but it's so costly to make necessary upgrades. So that is it for our preliminary feedback. The report is going to be much more in depth. Typically these reports run well over 50 pages, so there's lots more information coming, but this is just kind of a taste of what we're going to be giving you. Still to come on this project is some engagement analysis. We'll be doing our report synthesis, reviewing with staff at the SRD before presenting finally to the board. And you can still contribute to this project by visiting the Housing Needs Report website on the SRD's webpage. Please feel free to visit that. There's an opportunity to provide some brief feedback via a survey if you haven't already done so. And for more information on this project, you can contact Meredith Starkey at the Regional District, or myself. My number and email address are there. And I would like quickly before we go just to talk a bit about another opportunity for housing engagement in this SRD. The Campbell River Coalition to End Homelessness and its partners at the Urban Indigenous Housing and Wellness Coalition are conducting their own survey. It's a lot very different from ours. Ours focuses a lot on sort of quantitative metrics and of the ability to compare across jurisdictions. But in this survey, they're really focused on gathering stories about where people live and how people are experiencing housing insecurity across the SRD. So if you live in the SRD and feel that your home is not suitable or affordable, or finding it difficult to secure housing or services in your community, please consider filling this out. There's more information available at crhousing.net, or you can complete the survey at the link that I've listed here. So that's it for us. Thanks so much for your time. Again, for project updates, visit the SRD's website or feel free to contact me directly at the email listed on the screen. Thank you so much.